You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone, welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. I am your host Dustin, and with me as usual is Tony, and we are here to discuss all the content news from the past week. This is our first content-focused episode. We're going to be talking about all of the content that has been announced that will be coming to all of the services that we normally talk about. This time around, we'll be covering all of the news from October 25th through the 31st, and we have a significant amount of content to talk about, mostly because HBO Max had their announcement earlier this week, which we already discussed in the last episode, but we made a point to say that we weren't going to talk about the content on that episode because we are going to talk about it here. But there is some other stuff related to some of the other services, as well as the fact that there's always a new slew of trailers that get released, so we're going to discuss some of those. And then at the very end, we'll run down some of the content that's coming out over the next week as well. So, without further ado, let's jump into Netflix. So, first up, Netflix announced that currently there's a cartoon called Oogie and the Cockroaches, and this is a cartoon that's actually a French cartoon that's 20-something years old. I never even heard of this show until one of my children actually started watching it, and while it's French, there's no words. They don't speak words. It's kind of like some of the old Looney Tunes Roadrunner and Coyote ones, or Tom and Jerry is another good example, where there's a lot of action you see, but you don't actually have to have any dialogue. It's great for real small children. Two of my youngest children, they really enjoy the show, but it's just a simple show. Well, I guess the popularity of the 20-something-year-old cartoon that Netflix has the streaming rights to currently has decided to make Netflix order its first original animated series from France, because they're going to be making a CGI remake of the show, and this one's going to be called Oogie Oogie, which is just following the cat, not the cockroaches, and it specifically says it follows him who has been freed from the tyranny of the cockroaches and lives in a world of other cats where he engages with his neighbors and sets off adventures. There's not a whole lot to talk about here. It's coming. This is a lot of the content that we're going to be discussing that gets picked up and gets announced, unless it's something that's already been created. We're not going to see some of this stuff for a year. There's a lot of projects that get announced over a year out, especially the animation stuff, because that takes time to actually produce and create.
I read the title and I immediately thought of Benny and the Jets. I don't know much about the show. I didn't know about Oogie and the Cockroaches, the original cartoon show. Evidently it's been in production for 20 years and I didn't know about it, so I don't know if that's good or bad. So you said that there's no words in the cartoon, right? The original cartoon. Are there going to be words in just the new version of it with just following the cat?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, okay. I think at this point we don't really know. I would here's the thing. I would assume there probably isn't, but then again, there's another show that's pretty popular for Netflix, for kids on Netflix, which is called Masha and the Bear, and it's a Russian cartoon, but that because it's animated, they can dub it to be in a different language, and it's pretty popular here because it's one of the few series that's on Netflix that has spawned merchandise, because there hasn't been that many of them, but there has been some, and that's one of them. Prior to Toys R Us going out of business, there used to be Masha and Bear section of toys at Toys R Us. It's not unheard of for them to, dub it into a different language if it is in French, but I would assume they'd probably follow the same format without words.
Yeah, in my head, I'm just trying to piece the show together, and I'm just thinking of, Tom and Jerry, and it's like whatever, if Tom just was in a world with other Toms and how would that interact, and that's in my mind. It just seems like a new version of that, which is good. Our kids need that. They need their Tom and Jerry.
Yeah, they need simple cartoons that aren't necessarily trying to push any sort of agenda other than one's bad, one's good, because that's what a lot of those shows are. All right, next up, Netflix announced that they have got the world media rights to a 10-part World War II documentary series. This is called Greatest Events of the World War II in HD color. It will be in 190 territories, and they will badge it as a Netflix original. This is a series that is a follow-up to the Robert Powell narrated World War II in HD color. It's just basically a new World War II documentary. I have a tendency to watch these and in the background while I'm working because, well, I enjoy learning about history, but I don't necessarily need to watch every single one of these that comes out because a lot of times they are very similar in the story, because the story of World War II is let's be honest, we all know it. So
I mean, I think everyone loves a good World War II documentary. I think this could be a whole nother discussion in itself of World War II in modern society. Just thinking of the men and the women in that era, it's just totally different from the people today. And just seeing their sacrifices in a whole like worldwide scale, it's just not one particular group of people, sacrificing for something. It's like this whole movement that happened that changed the world. Technology changed, post-War II. We're living in post-World War II, and just the economics and political structure. Well, I think a lot of our generation is, we look back at World War II and just in awe of a lot of these accomplishments and a lot of the sacrifices. And I think that's why we love World War II documentaries. I mean, I've seen a lot of Netflix's, content out there. I think I've seen one or two of Hulu's, and, CNN, their films department, I think, has had a couple. I think the History Channel's had a few. It's just, focusing and watching those has just been very enlightening. And I think this is going to be awesome. I think with Netflix, they have the opportunity to not necessarily focus on trying to get it in within 50 minutes time frame and commercials and, make it formatted for TV. I think they can really go in depth and really go for it. World War II in color. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen the original, not that I'm aware of. I mean, I've seen a couple different ones. I think I've heard it. I've heard of it by name, mostly because I thought I specifically remember hearing about it because I thought, how do they have stuff in HD in color from World War II? I thought that was odd. But I know now because it has to do with them just upgrading the original footage.
This I promise has a point. The silver screen edition of Star Wars, if you don't know, when the prequels came out, after that George Lucas wanted to redo Star Wars and upgrade the CGI. The point is, the original movies, he kind of essentially got rid of all of them. There's a big push by people to bring them back because Han shot first. That's another debate, but we'll leave that there. The point is, the silver screen edition, they've gotten all this lost footage, like the original films and whatnot. What they've done is frame by frame use an HD camera and then now a 4K camera and take snapshots of each frame, and that's how they're making the HD version. So when I read in the article about them making it in color, and I saw that they got all of this lost footage from Japan, that's going to be interesting in Russia. Those viewpoints, I don't know. I'm curious about that part. But yeah, that's how they're going to make it in HDs. They're going to go frame by frame. 4K. They're going to go frame by frame. Take those images and then put them together. So I think it's going to be really good. It's awesome. It kind of seems like it's Netflix's alternative to Apple's Spielberg's, Band of Brothers. They have their own historical thing compared to Apple TV's historical thing per se. Yeah.
All right. So there's a show on Netflix called Another Life. I personally have not seen it, but it centers around an astronaut who is focused on searching for alien intelligence, and she leads a crew on a mission to explore the genesis of an alien artifact. Her and her young crew investigate. They are faced with unimaginable danger on what very well may be a one-way mission. This one came out earlier this year, and they have announced that it's been picked up for a second 10-episode season. So if you have watched that show, you can expect to see a new season coming in 2020.
From just about the press coverage of it and some of the comments on Twitter, it seems like this is a very well received show, and so I'm glad that it's getting a second season.
All right, so another show that was just announced for Netflix is I'm going to say, there we go,
Ramaniana.
Yes. Inspired animated action drama series. That's a mouthful by itself, but it's called Heaven's Forest, and it's from the creative team behind the Castlevania animated series that's also on Netflix. This is Indo-futuristic world with storyline and characters inspired by the Indian mythology.
Yeah, so Greek culture. We grew up in, we read, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Those are two famous works of history, very famous. You have the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is another very famous text. It's probably one of the oldest stories written in the Hindu culture. There are two big stories that are really huge and have a lot of plot points. You got like a Romeo and Juliet type of story. Anyway, there's a lot to it. But yeah, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana are two like very, 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 very like big things. Unfortunately, it's not really known here in the States, but yeah, they're part of other religious texts. It's like a religious text that's also like a lot of story and woven with like wisdom and stuff like that. So I don't know how they're going to be able to do it, just because if you want to learn more about, these two stories, just look at the Wikipedia pages. But when you look at the plots of these two major stories, it just doesn't seem like it would lead well to any type of a show, but especially like a CGI animated series, because animated series are not really, they usually aim for either a younger audience or like Adult Swim type content. So I just don't know how they're going to pull this off.
The only thing I could think of is there are some stuff that's Adult Swim that is clearly geared towards a very specific audience. There is the other side of it, which is anime. Anime has its own group of fans by itself. I haven't seen Castlevania. I've heard enough about it to know that people enjoyed it and thought it was good. But I don't remember seeing anything about the actual style, like seeing it visually, didn't know whether or not it was in that anime type style. But if it was, that could explain the audience that they're trying to go for too, is just creating a new storyline that isn't necessarily set in Japan or in Asia at all, and just doing something that's also in that type of style that they've already used. So that's the only thing I could think of. So,
are they focusing this in like worldwide in America, or are they just trying to target the Indian audience?
I'm pretty sure this is worldwide, specifically because the people involved are like Warren Ellis is the person,
really?
yeah, the writer behind this. So I'm pretty sure that it's intended to be all over the place.
Gotcha.
All right, so that's the end of the Netflix news. If we jump over to Prime Video, they haven't announced anything new specifically this past week. Apple TV Plus, which is right around the corner, literally as you're listening to this, it has now launched. And while we don't know, there hasn't been a whole lot of details as far as when it's actually going to be launching, what, specifically what time or anything like that. It's meant to launch this Friday, and it's the basic gist is the first 3 episodes of all the shows are going to be released. The film The Elephant Queen will be released in its entirety, and we talked about this a couple episodes about how Dickinson could be releasing its entire first season on launch day, but I haven't been able to see any sort of confirmation as far as if that is the plan, if all of these the episode count for all of these shows. Well, we have a general idea of the episode count based off of information that has been published over on Wikipedia. We don't have confirmation from Apple. Meanwhile, Disney sat there and released their entire release schedule for The Mandalorian, which is the big show coming to their service on launch day. Apple has a bunch of shows, and the episode counts could extremely vary. So they're going to have, their finales are going to wrap up on different days, hypothetically. But the thing to talk about Apple is, while this isn't we're not looking at a specific article or anything like that, reviews in general have come out for the Apple TV Plus shows, the original shows that they have coming for the service. To put it kindly, they haven't been super favorable. I wouldn't say they're being extremely harsh in any way, as in they're really, really bad. But a lot of critics are just looking at the shows and saying they're pretty mediocre. The one exception, however, is For All Mankind, which conveniently is the one show that I'm legitimately interested in watching and considering at least signing up for the trial to watch the the first season after it's released all its episodes. But yeah, it's an interesting situation that Apple has got themselves into. What do you think?
Yeah, it's I think it's unfortunate. I think their content, the way how they've curated their content, I think they wanted to be original. I think they wanted to do bold ideas. Unfortunately, sometimes bold ideas, you take risks and they might flop. And unfortunately, they made some flops. Part of that is due to Apple's, interference per se. I know that Tim Cook has been very hands-on in terms of, content and branding, and does it fit with the Apple overall message and their stance on things, which kind of forces the production teams to maybe change their plans. But I think it's unfortunate when you start off with not a lot of content, and it's kind of people view it as mediocre, and I think it's just a poor start by Apple. They can recover, especially For All Mankind's a hit. Apple has just a whole bucket load of cash just to spend, and so I think they'll get there. Just this is a rocky start. Let's see how All Mankind goes. It seems like the morning show is going to be like the second biggest hit. Then C with Jason Momoa. I mean, he's a great actor, and a lot of people like to pay attention to him. And so I think between those three shows, those are going to be leading the charge. And if they do reasonably okay, then I think Apple can go into the second round or second season per se of curating content, and can be a little bit happier of where they are. I think having like Spielberg come on and doing a couple of his series is going to really help boost the legitimacy of Apple TV, because just his cachet, his gravitas in the movie industry, the stuff that he's done. And so it's just a bad start by Apple, but I think that they have the ability to correct their ship. Just it's going to take a long time to really get where they want to go.
A lot of the shows that they actually have coming too have already been renewed for second seasons, so there's not there's not the likelihood of it not happening. Dickinson's already been renewed for a second season. For All Mankind's already gotten renewed for a second season. The Morning Show has going to have at least 2 seasons. C is going to have at least 2 seasons. So it's not that even if they don't do well, they will be able to maybe correct some of the issues that they've had with the first seasons too. So that's a possibility.
You don't think they might cancel? Like, let's pick on Dickinson. Just because we can.
Right.
Do you think if Dickinson just really is not received well, that they might just, hey, let's just cut our losses?
See, a typical network, I could see that happening, but the fact that they just don't have a ton of content lined up, like you look at the list that they have on Wikipedia of all the stuff that's been confirmed up to this point, they have a bunch of stuff. But when you look at the announcement schedule of when some of these shows have been announced, there is honestly not a lot of stuff that is going to be coming right away. I mean, the thing is, we know that there's certain shows. For example, there's a show called Truth Be Told, which a trailer released for that recently. There's a show called Servant, which is coming at the end of November, and they've announced that that Central Park animated musical comedy that they have, that's coming at the end of January. So, those are the only 3 shows that they've announced dates for up until, for the first 3 months that the service is going to be out there. So I don't know if they really can risk not going ahead with the shows they already have, because they don't have a lot of content. That's already the main criticism of the service, is they don't have a lot of content. So I can't imagine that, especially if they've already been renewed for second seasons, I'm not sure that they can at this point go back on that, despite the reception being poor. There's plenty. I think if they've already picked it up and they've already, committed to it, there's already work being put into it. Obviously, they could hypothetically just drop money and say, okay, we're really not going to do a second season. Here's a bunch of money to go away. They have the money to do that. If it was another service, they probably couldn't. But I think because it's Apple, if it's already been renewed for a second season, it's probably pretty guaranteed that it's going to happen.
Yeah. Do you feel, we were talking a little bit about this pre-show. I was watching Arrow on CW today, and there's just a crap ton of Apple TV ads that have been rolling, and it seems more than a usual streaming service. Do you feel like Apple's is overcompensating in advertising for kind of some of the negative press it's gotten for these shows?
Most definitely. I mean, quite honestly, I was for the longest time seeing a lot of ads for All Mankind, and I suddenly have been seeing a lot less ads for that one, and that's the one that's been getting good reviews. I've been seeing a lot more commercials for C and the morning show. Well, morning show I probably has been just as much as For All Mankind, but I haven't really seen any commercials for All Mankind for at least the last couple weeks. And that's not to say that they're not out there. I'm just not seeing them. But I'm seeing the morning show everywhere. I'm seeing commercials for C plastered everywhere. Yeah. I mean, I watch a lot of stuff on YouTube. I watch some stuff on broadcast. But I mean, everywhere I go, there's ads for C. It really feels like, yes, they are overcompensating to kind of offset some of these bad reviews. And again, they have the money to throw at marketing for these shows. So I see the reasoning. I just don't necessarily think it's the best idea as a company to just throw money at stuff. I don't know that this entire process was the best idea for Apple in general, but that's a conversation for a whole nother episode.
I think it's just growing pains of launching a service. I think that they've learned a lot through this process, and I think the second round of shows is I think it's going to be better than what it is.
All right, so moving on to Disney Plus, there's a couple of new things. Some of these I'm going to breeze through pretty quickly because there's not a lot to talk about. So if you are familiar with the animated movies Ice Age and Rio, there's rumors out there that there's spin-offs in early development for Disney Plus. So if you're unfamiliar, Ice Age, Rio, those were movie franchises that actually were existing from Blue Sky Studios, which was part of Fox prior to Fox being bought by Disney. It still exists, but those are some of the few animated franchises that have been pretty successful over at Fox. They've also created some other things. They did the Peanuts movie a couple years back, Robots, Ferdinand. They also have another film coming out in December called Spies in Disguise, which has Tom Holland and Will Smith. That's coming from Blue Sky, but the basic idea is Disney going to keep putting out animation projects by another studio that is not part of their group of studios, or their original group of studios, I should say? Would they really keep yet another animation studio when they already have multiple animation studios within Walt Disney? They have Pixar. Would they even keep something like this? And the rumor is that they will be keeping them around at least for some time because they're looking at doing some spin-off shows for Disney Plus, which I could see working. I don't think that Disney's going to be putting effort into releasing animated movies outside their core animation stuff from Walt Disney Animation or Pixar, but for the streaming service, it makes perfect sense because they're there. Why not utilize them for something? And while those franchises aren't as popular as some of the Disney stuff, they made enough money to have multiple films created over and over again. So I think that this is something that makes sense. It's a move that makes perfect sense. And Disney's already putting a bunch of other animated series, creating other animated series based off of other properties as well. So I think this is something that's entirely possible.
I think it's great. I'm not the biggest fan of spin-off and revival culture. I feel like we need more original ideas, but Ice Age just kind of makes me feel like a kid again. Those are just funny movies to watch, and I feel like a lot of the next generation of kids have seen these movies, and so they already have that, like brand awareness. And the Ice Age movies are funny, and there's room in that universe to spin off. And between Ice Age and Rio, I think that this is a great move. I think it's simple. I think it's gonna really. I read the headline and I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like I might have my girlfriend's daughter, check it out because it is fun. It's just good.
All right. So then the next news is we just talked about Apple or somebody picking up a Christmas Carol remake featuring Will Ferrell and Ryan Reynolds. Well, it turns out Disney's also working on one, but this one is going to be a musical. And they're working on this with Bill Condon, who's best known for winning an Oscar for the movie Chicago back in 2003, but he also recently worked on the live-action remake of Beauty and the Beast just a couple years back. And now he's going to be working with Disney to do a musical version of The Christmas Carol. And Steven Schwartz, who has been the composer and the creator of the lyrics behind Broadway's Wicked, and has also won 3 Oscars, he's going to be writing the music for the project. There's no word specifically on if this project is planned to be a Disney Plus or Disney. The assumption is that it's going to be a Disney Plus project at this time, specifically because Disney has a very, very packed slate, especially with absorbing 20th Century Fox and all of the projects that they have currently over there. It feels like this project is very much going to be a Disney Plus project.
When I first saw this headline, I was like, goodness, another Christmas Carol adaptation, just not interesting. But looking more into the article and seeing just the producers behind it and what they've done and their success, this might be a hit. This might be a hit that is just, I think it's going to be one of those sleepers that's just going to be great. So I'm excited. I was pleasantly surprised, let's put it that way, of the Christmas Carol.
All right, so then some new shows that were also announced for Disney Plus. The Disney Plus is teaming with LeBron James to bring on a new docuseries that spotlights the upbringings of athletes and celebrities called Becoming. This is going to have different celebrities go back to their hometown and give an inspiring look on how they became the superstars that they are today. This is going to be something that was originally created for Disney XD by ESPN Films, but instead will be moving over to Disney Plus. It sounds like a good premise. I don't know.
It's just not for me.
Yeah, it's not something that I'm going to probably make time for, but I think that it'll have its fans and it could be successful.
Totally.
All right, so then another one, and I'm a little bit more excited about this one. There was a new show that's going to be coming from the Jim Henson Company that is a puppet talk show, and this is in fact coming to Disney Plus. And
this is the one that you're the most excited for.
Out of the stuff that Disney Plus, all of these announcements we've had for Disney Plus, this is the one that I'm most excited. I'm a huge Muppets fan.
Okay.
And while the Muppets themselves aren't appearing on this, the idea is that it's a talk show. There's a guy who's an alien. He's come to Earth, and he is trying to do a show to show his race of aliens back home that Earth isn't such a bad place. So he has celebrities and guests on, and he interviews them and talks to them to show what Earth really can be. So I think the premise is cool. I mean, I am a sucker for scripted late night shows, if you know what I mean, like something like the Muppet Show. The original Muppet Show obviously is the one that immediately comes to mind, but something where it has guests, but it's all planned. It's all planned out ahead of time. I like that. Yeah. I don't really enjoy just having a simple interview. Let's hype up your latest project. Let's do that. So this could be different because it doesn't feel like it's going to be that. Plus, because it's coming to a streaming service, I don't think they're really going to be going the route of what random guest can we have on that's going to be able to promote a project, because this is going to be, the idea would be for it to be watched over and over again and not be specifically constrained by the time that it was released and whatever project that person is creating. So I think the idea is kind of cool. It is already moving forward. It's not something that they're going to be working on a pilot or anything, but it actually is. There was a huge description. If you look at the show notes, they have a massive backstory as to how this alien came to Earth and why he's doing what he's doing. So it was all very interesting, in my opinion.
This is the one piece of news that I just have no interest for at all. I'm not a puppet guy. I am not a guy who likes puppets interviewing other people for a talk show. Not interested.
I'm not surprised. If you did like, if our listeners out there who watched Dark Crystal, The Age of Resistance, which was just on Netflix just a little while ago, it's the same people behind that project are doing this project, the Jim Henson Company. So if you enjoyed that to some degree, then you might enjoy this project, but there's that. And then finally, the last project that was announced is a new project called Big Shot, which is going to star John Stamos, and it's a new dramedy series about basketball from David E. Kelly, Brad Garrett, and Dean Lorey. This is the basic gist is it's a 10-episode series that follows a temperamental college basketball coach who gets fired from his job and must take a teaching and coaching job at an elite all-girls private high school. Again, inspirational sports thing. This is in the same vein as like Miracle or Coach Carter.
This is the most Disney content that I probably have read. It's one of those that, one, John Stamos is amazing, but two, it's just the premise is simple. It talks about sports. It talks about, overcoming adversity, I guess. People targeting people in high school is just super relatable, that has some message out there that people can relate with, but it doesn't really push anything. It's just one of those, like, people are going to find their own strength in the movie, and it's going to be one that people are going to talk about. It's the most Disney thing that Disney's putting out. Moving
out of Disney Plus and moving over to HBO Max, we talked about some of the HBO Max stuff, but before the big announcements that we got from the event a couple days ago, there was 2 new projects that were announced. First up, there's a competitive floristry show called Full Bloom that's going to be HBO Max. This is coming from the same people who previously worked on Holy Moly, which is a miniature golf show that was on ABC over the summer. I'm not even going to go into the details of that. If you want to learn more details about that show, I mean, let's be honest, it's a florist competition show. I think it's self-explanatory.
I think that this show is going to be a hit. Isn't there another competitive florist show on a streaming service?
I can't tell if you're serious or not.
No, I'm dead serious.
I don't think there is.
I think this is going to turn into like one of those like baking wars type shows.
Yeah, the Great American Baking.
It's going to have like a cult following, and I think this is going to be a secret hit.
Another project that was announced.
I know you disagree.
I don't. I mean, like, I could see where you're coming from. I didn't even think about comparing it to something like the Great American Bake Off or whatever it's called. I know that show is extremely successful over on Netflix. They have a holiday edition that comes out every year, and I know I've heard lots of people talking about how they watch it. I personally don't watch really any competition shows whatsoever, so it's not something that appeals to me. But I could see when you bring it up, it does make sense that it could be popular. So I could see that. I mean, there's also Food Network, which literally has, I think 50% of its programming is competition shows. So, and there's plenty of people who watch that network as well. So I could see it.
Yeah, and
all right. So then another project that was announced, they're doing a documentary all about Anthony Bourdain and his life. This is going to be coming from CNN Films and Focus Features, as well as HBO Max. It will be basically following the uncommon life of the late storyteller, explorer, and chef. The documentary will actually be released in theaters first and then premiere on CNN along with HBO Max. So that's coming as well. Before we get into the massive content rundown of everything that was announced, I want to talk about 2 deals that were put in place that I think are pretty big. So a couple weeks back, I think this was before we started our news episodes, there was a report going around that South Park was looking for a streaming home. The reports that we had seen were talking about how South Park could in fact be something like The Office or Friends, where it could be in the $500 million range to wherever they end up landing. And as it turns out, all of South Park, along with 3 new seasons, will be going over to HBO Max. And what's interesting is that the deal was a split deal with Viacom. And what that basically means is that while Comedy Central is owned by Viacom, but Comedy Central is where the show has been called home for the last 23 seasons. It will continue to air the new seasons over there, but they will also air 24 hours afterwards on HBO Max, which means instead of showing up on a place like Hulu or some other live TV situation location, it means that the show will immediately, a day after it airs, be on HBO Max, which is pretty quick. And that's the split part of it, is Viacom will still have the rights to air it as a show on Comedy Central, but then it'll be streaming and the library of the show will be on HBO Max. Now, there's no word exactly to how much this cost, mostly because they're not going to talk all about how much it costs, but I would imagine it probably didn't get to the range of $500 million, but it was probably pretty up there as far as a couple $100 million at least.
Yeah, it's a very bingeable show. I love South Park. I probably shouldn't, and I probably seen too much of it in my opinion, but it's a very bingeable show. It's one of those that I can watch pretty much all 23 seasons straight and just enjoy my time. It doesn't get old. It might morally impact you in certain ways just because it's just ridiculous, but it's just a definitely bingeable show that, let's just say that HBO Max, if they did statistics on this show and then the next show that you're talking about, Rick and Morty, they're very bingeable. That's why HBO Max got it. It's just because how bingeable content it is.
So speaking of Rick and Morty, that's another show that will also be on HBO Max. Currently the show is airing on Adult Swim, which is on Cartoon Network, which is owned by Turner, which is part of Warner Media. And this show recently just got a 70 episode order, and its upcoming fourth season is going to be airing or at least starting in November. The first 3 seasons that have aired to date will be available immediately on HBO Max when it launches in May 2020. Future seasons will continue to premiere on Adult Swim before they come over to HBO Max. No word exactly how quickly, but the interesting thing about this deal is that it's not exclusive. Rick and Morty's current streaming home, which is Hulu, will continue to carry the hit animated comedy. They specifically have expanded its agreement with Adult Swim to get access to all 101 existing and commissioned episodes of the show as well. So at least for the next how many ever episodes, because all commissioned episodes would include the 70 episodes they just got picked up for, it means that it will be appearing on Hulu as well as HBO Max. Not exactly sure how that came to be, because that seems like an odd deal. It's a property that appears on Warner Brothers properties in general, so that's part of it, but they already have this existing deal with Hulu, but they're splitting the cost between Hulu and themselves to keep the show, to have the streaming rights to the show. So this one was unique specifically because of that deal.
Rick and Morty is another bingeable show that a lot of people enjoy. It's not my show, but this is a very weird deal, I think, in terms of scope for potentially other streaming deals. I know that, people want these shows to be exclusive, but I could see more deals in the future being split between multiple companies. So I think that this is a good step forward, I think, for content creators. But Rick and Morty is not my show, so it's a lot of people are going to like it, so go HBO.
All right, so then diving into the announcements from the event with all the content. So to make this go as smoothly as possible, I'm going to break this into the different sections: kids and family, young adult, and adult. I'm going to just mention the new shows, give you a brief rundown, and then after we get through each section, we'll talk about the ones that we are actually excited for. So first up, kids and family, the new shows that were announced, starting off with The Fungies, is a prehistoric comedy exploring Fungi Town through the whimsical quest of Seth, a young student at Fungi Town Elementary. Seth loves science and sharing his exciting discoveries with all his fungi friends. But in his search for the ultimate scientific adventure, Seth often stirs up trouble for Fungi Town's colorful inhabitants, leading to hilarious and heartwarming surprises. Next up, Jellystone. Welcome to the town of Jellystone, a charming place where all your favorite Hanna-Barbera characters live, work, and play together, but at the same time can't help but to stir up trouble for one another. Next up, Looney Tune Cartoons, an all-new Looney Tune cartoon series featuring the marquee characters in the classic pairings in a simple, gag-driven, and visually vibrant stories. HBO Max has ordered 80 11-minute episodes, with each comprised of animated shorts that include adapted storylines for today's audience. Fans can also look forward to holiday-themed specials as well. Tig and Seek is about an 8-year-old Tiki and his gadget-building cat Gizweek as they search for the lost items of Ouija City. As Tiggy's cheerful attitude and Gizweek's exceptional inventing capabilities, the duo humorously navigate day-to-day dilemmas at the Department of Lost and Found. So those are all of the animated projects. Some of these projects, the Tig and Seek and the Fungies, I believe, were originally meant for Cartoon Network, and they just have been moved over to HBO Max. And that's not all. And to be clear, like I said, I'm not talking about all of the kids' content, because there's obviously Sesame Street. There's the Gremlins show that was announced ages ago that will most likely be launching with it. There's a lot of shows that they've already talked about, but I'm just mentioning the stuff that's newly announced, because there's let's be honest, there's too much. But if you do click on the article that we have in the show notes, you'll see the full list of everything that's coming out. But is there any of those shows that remotely sound interesting to you? I mean, obviously they're geared towards a kid's audience, but...
I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Just personally, I'm not interested in any of these.
I mean, I've got 3 kids, so some of this stuff is obviously going to work for me. I'm a huge Hanna-Barbera fan in general, so the idea of a show that features a lot of the classic characters from Hanna-Barbera, like Yogi Bear, Boo Boo, Huckleberry Hound, Magilla Gorilla, something like that, but reworked for a modern take on it, I think could be really interesting. I'm questioning because, of course, you look at stuff like Teen Titans Go, which is taking those characters and putting them in my opinion, not so great lights. But then again, my kids watch it and they think it's funny, so there's that, but I'd prefer if it was just a little bit better. But the one thing that I'm probably most looking forward to as far as the new content is more Looney Tunes. I've always loved Looney Tunes, probably more than most other animated franchises, and I'm pretty pumped about new Looney Tunes cartoons. And the thing is, while there was something that was announced, I want to say back in May, and I don't know if this is the same thing because it sounds like it's the same thing, but there was a series of shorts that were ordered by Warner Brothers, and the gist of it was that the shorts were going to be featuring different animation styles, directed and written by a variety of different people from throughout time. And I don't know where those ended up because I've seen like maybe a couple of them pop up on YouTube, but there was a lot of episodes that were supposedly, or a lot of shorts that were supposedly created for, that were focusing on the Looney Tunes. And if this is something completely new, again, I'm for it. I'm weary because the last couple of Looney Tunes shows that they've had on Cartoon Network, the animation style has drastically gotten away from the original Looney Tunes, and that's a concern I have. But yeah, so all right. So then moving over to the young adult stuff, there was a show called College Girls, which is currently a working title. This is from Mindy Kaling. This comedy follows 3 18-year-old freshman roommates at Evermore College in Vermont. A bundle of contradictions and hormones, these sexually active college girls are equal parts lovable and infuriating. DC Superhero High, this half-hour comedy executive produced by Elizabeth Banks, follows a group of students experiencing the fun and drama of adolescence at a boarding school for gifted kids. These teens are just trying to navigate the pressures of high school, but none of them realize that someday they will become legendary DC superheroes. Green Lantern, inspired by DC Comics' Green Lantern and introducing characters from this iconic comic, this one will be one of the biggest shows Berlanti Productions has ever done. Strange Adventures, a superhero anthology executive produced by Greg Berlanti. Strange Adventures will feature characters from across the DC canon. The drama will explore close-ended morality tales about the intersecting lives of mortals and superhumans. Tuned Out, executive produced by Robert Zemeckis. Tuned Out is a half-hour hybrid live-action and animated comedy in development for HBO Max. Things get a little cartoony for Mac when he starts seeing iconic cartoon characters, but they're not just there for laughs. They're helping him get through a very rough patch in his life. So those are the shows that are coming for young adults that they have listed. So obviously the one that I'm probably the most interested in is the DC stuff. There's 3 different DC series. I'm really interested to see how DC Superhero High actually works because, let's be honest, a school for the gifted that is a boarding school that sounds just like Xavier's School of Gifted. X-Men. So, but it's meant to be a comedy, so I don't know. I mean, like, to be fair, they tried to do a comedy a couple years back, and the name escapes me right now, but it was a workplace comedy that dealt with a company that was trying to invent things for superheroes. It didn't go well. It was originally pitched as a company who is an insurance company dealing with accidents that were caused by superheroes, and then it shifted and became some sort of weird company where they were constantly trying to create gadgets. Needless to say, it didn't. It was on NBC and it got canceled before the first season even finished airing. I'm curious to know how this one.
Yeah, that comedy. I remember it. It starred Alan Tudyk, and it failed. Although I thought it was funny. DC Super High, I think, is going to resonate with people. So if it's just straight up copies X-Men, if it just does that, X-Men is very relatable to a lot of teens, and that's why it's kind of revered to people this day. Because during one of the famous runs, a lot of people who read at the time we were younger really bonded with this series. So I could see this being a hit, and I feel like they can navigate all those things pretty well. This is the one that I got the most questions about, and I'm the most hesitant. But from a purely likable, which one I would actually check out, it would be Strange Adventures, just because it's superheroes and I like everything Greg Berlanti does. And
all right, so then moving over to the adult content, there's a movie called Bobby Sue. After being raised among 4 rowdy brothers in a blue-collar neighborhood, Bobby Sue, a headstrong young lawyer, lands a career making case with an upper crust law firm, only to realize she's been hired for optics and not her expertise. But after discovering her powerful client, a lifelong idol of hers, is trying to cover up exploiting workers within her company, Bobby decides to take both her law and the law firm on. Caution and etiquette be damned. So, next up we have Raised by Wolves, an epic serialized sci-fi series executive produced and directed by Ridley Scott. The series centers on 2 androids tasked with raising human children on a mysterious virgin planet. As the burgeoning colony of humans threatens to be torn apart by religious differences, the androids learn that controlling the beliefs of humans is a treacherous and difficult task. This series was originally supposed to pop up on TNT, but it's now been moved over to HBO Max as well. Next up, Rap Blank. Not going to say the full thing. That's a working title currently from Isa Rae. Rap Blank is a half-hour comedy series that follows 3 women, a hip-hop duo, and their hustler manager trying to make it in Miami's music industry. There's stand-up specials presented by Conan O'Brien, 5 new comedy specials that include 2 hosted by Conan O'Brien, showcasing short sets from multiple up-and-coming comics, as well as curated 1-hour-long sets from 3 additional comedians. I imagine this will be in the same vein as some, how Netflix has a ton of comedy series. HBO clearly has comedy series as well, or comedy specials as well, but I'm guessing for HBO Max, they're going to be utilizing Conan O'Brien's expertise with the industry to find people to focus on. So, as far as the adult series, I gotta say, there's not anything specifically that jumps out. Raising with Wolves, I'd probably check out, but I probably would wait to decide that for sure until I see a trailer, because I haven't seen one.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. Out of all these new ones, I'm interested in none of them. We're gonna post this in the show notes. It's just a huge article, and I'm interested in a few other shows that weren't announced on Monday. So yeah, I'm just not feeling these new ones.
And the one other thing that they announced that is outside of the realm of HBO Max originals is they did announce, in fact, a new Game of Thrones show called House of the Dragon. And
okay, I like that.
Yes. They waited till literally the last moment of the event to announce this, and right before the questions and answer session. And they announced this. It is a series that George R.R. Martin is executive producing. And while it's not going to be an HBO Max exclusive series, it will be on HBO, and obviously it will be also on HBO Max. But anybody who has HBO will be able to watch it as well. It's a new Game of Thrones series that deals with the rise and fall of the Targaryen house. So
yes, 300 years before the events of Game of Thrones. Do you know what that means? There are going to be a whole lot of freaking dragons in here.
Should be.
Yeah. Which is going to be awesome.
All right, so that is all the HBO Max stuff. Like I said, if you are interested in the full list of content in the show notes, we do have a link to an article over on Deadline that's going to roll through all of it. To wrap up all of the content news, I'm just going to name these because there's not a lot to go off of, because Quibi, like we've said in the last couple episodes, Quibi has a tendency to make sure that they are constantly remaining relevant by announcing new content all the time. So I'm just going to mention all these new projects they've announced over the past couple days. Quibi has greenlighted a comedy game show called Nice One with Ron Funks, and then they announced that they're working with fashion designer Alexander Wang for a show called Potty Talk. They're working on a show called Skirt with Offset, which is a car series that will feature Migos member as a host. And then finally, Dave Franco will be starring in a new Farley Brothers comedy over at Quibi as well called The Now. I don't have a lot to say about any of the Quibi stuff because right now it just feels like it's a bunch of press releases to get people to continue to talk about it, if I'm being honest. So,
Potty talk is the weirdest thing I've ever heard about. It's like set in bathrooms and intimate conversations and what. This is the weirdest one that they've ever announced.
But it makes sense for something that's less than 10 minutes because I'm not sure how long people want to listen to people talking in a bathroom for. So, all right. So then to wrap up the episode, there was a bunch of new trailers that came out. The Mandalorian for Disney Plus, new trailer for that. The World According to Jeff Goldblum on Disney Plus, Encore on Disney Plus, The End of the Effing World Season 2 on Netflix, Pixar Spark Shorts on Disney Plus, Pixar IRL on Disney Plus, Forky Asks a Question on Disney Plus, and then the latest trailer was The Witcher on Netflix. Wherever you're reading or you're listening to this episode, their show notes has links to all these trailers as well as the release dates for these projects over there. I assume if I ask you the question of was there a trailer that stuck out to you, I'm going to guess you said Mandalorian.
Yes, I messaged in the group chat just my love for it. This is the most Star Wars thing I think Disney's done, and I know that might be a little controversial, but it feels great. It looks like Star Wars. It sounds like Star Wars. It feels like Star Wars, and I freaking love Star Wars. And the trailer came on during Monday Night Football. And I didn't know it was going to come on, but it was like the full-length trailer. Yeah, because they played like the mini teasers, but I saw the new trailer and I'm like, take my money. So yeah. I know we have a couple friends in common, and I know that they are really interested in The Witcher. I am personally not. Forky asks a question. Now that isn't my movie ever, but I know that is popular. So
Mandalorian looked to be fair, I am super pumped about that series. I'm really looking forward to it. It, like you said, it looks like Star Wars, but the best part is it looks like Star Wars, but a completely original story, and that's what I'm most interested in. While events that have taken place, during the Skywalker saga have molded certain things to the direction that they need to go, it feels like a completely original story, which I'm most interested in because I don't feel like we've really seen that outside of any of the films that have been released. Everything fits someplace within the Skywalker saga, and I'm looking forward to something that still fits in to the space, but it's an original story that doesn't deal with characters that we've already seen. So I'm pumped about that. The Pixar IRL trailer was one that I watched, and I thought, that looks amusing. Basically, the idea is to take Pixar characters or Pixar situations from the movies and put them in real life. So you'll see a life-size Wall-E driving down the city of New York City and seeing people's reactions to it. Or you'll see the board from Inside Out where, the emotions control what they're doing or thinking or whatever. And then suddenly the board's sitting there and people just randomly push a button and somebody reacts to whatever you're pushing. It looked like it was an interesting take on a prank show, but not really a prank show, more of like a reaction, like caught on camera or candid camera or something like that, where it's very much in the vein of not necessarily playing a prank on anybody, but just trying to get people's honest reactions on camera. So I thought that looked kind of cool. All right, so then over the next week, November 1st through the 7th, there's a lot of stuff releasing. So I'm going to roll through a lot of this. At this point in time, we know that at least the first 3 episodes of the new series should be released on November 1st. But outside of that, we don't have any other firm details on whether or not they're going to continuously release on every single Friday, or if they're going to be released on a different day of the week, or if they're going to split up the release dates. We don't know anything because Apple has been pretty quiet about how exactly this is all working. All we know is that the first 3 episodes are releasing, and they're planning on releasing the subsequent episodes once per week afterwards. But so I don't have specifics on that, but I do know all of those are coming on November 1st, which is the day you're listening to this episode. But some other stuff. American Son, which is a limited series over on Netflix, is coming on November 1st. I'm just going to go through all the November 1st stuff first. So Atypical Season 3 over on Netflix. Drive, which is an Indian film, over on Netflix. Fire in Paradise, which is a documentary, is over on Netflix. Hache, which is a Spanish series on Netflix. Hello Ninja, which is a Canadian kids series over on Netflix. Holiday in the Wild, that is a film over on Netflix. The King, which is a film over on Netflix. The Man Without Gravity, which is an Italian film over on Netflix. Queer Eye, We're in Japan, which is a reality special on Netflix. True Grabble Apple Harvest, which is a Canadian kids special over on Netflix. We Are the Wave Season 1 over on Netflix. Then we have Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan Season 2 over on Prime Video. And then, like I said, the Apple shows The Morning Show, For All Mankind, C. Dickinson, Helpsters, Snoopy in Space, Ghost Rider. Those are all new series, as well as The Elephant Queen, which is a documentary. Then we have Into the Dark Pilgrim, which is a single episode over on Hulu. Moving over to November 4th, The Devil Next Door, which is a limited series on Netflix. November 5th, we have The End of the Effing World Season 2 on Netflix. Seth Meyers' Lobby Baby, which is a comedy special on Netflix. She-Ra and the Princess of Power, which is a children's series over on, which is Season 4 over on Netflix. Tune In for Love, a Korean film over on Netflix. And then on November 6th, we have Scams, which is a Japanese series over on Netflix as well. So that is all the content. Is there anything that you heard that you're interested in taking a look at over the next week?
I know about Atypical. I watched a few episodes of it, a few seasons. It is one of the most interesting shows on this list. It's a weird comedy. Yeah, listeners, just watch an episode or two. It's just very different in I think in a good way. The only thing that interests me that's actually coming out is Jack Ryan Season 2. I'm a big John Krasinski fan, and I know that this series has just, the first season did great, gangbusters. This new series looks awesome, and I'm just happy for it. For the record, the Spanish series, it's called Ache.
Ache, okay. Yeah, I'm not very good at pronouncing things. Listeners, if you are well aware, or you'll learn this over the course of the many times I have to pronounce things in the future, but I'm very, very bad at pronouncing things. Sometimes I try to look things up ahead of time, but even listening to it 15 times ahead of time, I still mess it up. So I apologize in advance for anything else that I say incorrectly, because it's going to happen. I can guarantee it. So, shows that I'm looking forward to. I've seen both seasons of Atypical. It's a good show. I plan on watching that. I am interested in the Fire in Paradise documentary, which is talking about the massive wildfires that were in California last year, but it's talking all about that and the people who had to basically that dealt with the fires, and actually has like footage from the people who are experiencing the fires, which is interesting, not in necessarily a good way, but California just happens to be dealing with some massive wildfires yet again this next year. The King, I saw the trailer for that, and it looked kind of interesting. I'm not sure if I'll check that out right away, but it'll probably get added to my list. But Jack Ryan, like you said, is the one that's probably the one that I'm probably going to make a pretty big effort to actually watch this weekend, or at least in the near future. My wife watches that with me as well, and that's always a little difficult to make the timing work for that, but that's a show that I'm going to be watching. She-Ra and the Princess of Power, my daughter's going to be all over that because she loves that show. If I was going to subscribe to Apple TV Plus, I would check out For All Mankind right away. But like I said, I'm going to hold off on subscribing to Apple TV Plus for the time being. I have no desire to subscribe and pay $5 a month for the amount of content that there is. If there was more content, not necessarily old content, because like I've said, I'm not really the type of person who's watching a lot of old content, but I just wish there was more content that I was interested in. I'd probably check out The Morning Show if I was subscribing as well, but For All Mankind is the only one that I would actually want to watch right away.
I might pay money to see the Spielberg stuff, but yeah, I agree with you for everything else. Just nope.
Amazing Stories, when it eventually comes out, which is the Spielberg series, there's no word on when it should be coming, but it should be coming because it was one of the projects they announced back in April, along with a lot of these other ones. So it should be coming at least soon, probably within the first couple, within the first 6 months, I would assume. That's another one that I'm interested in, but again, it's just one series. And I don't know that I can keep the idea of subscribing to something if there's only one series. Maybe pay $5, watch the series, then wait for another series to come out, pay $5 and watch that series. That might be the route I go. I don't know.
Yeah, you're essentially renting
Right.
that season.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's that. So, I'll be honest, this past week there wasn't a whole lot of content that I was interested in watching this time around. The only thing I did watch this past week was I watched the latest season of Succession, which is over on HBO. Finished that up. That's not on a streaming service, but that's what I've been watching. Anything you've been watching outside of sports?
No, it's been a crazy time at work, so I've spent most of my time either sleeping or working. So if there is TV on, it's been sports just playing in the background because that just numbs the soul. So really the only streaming related thing I did watch was today. I watched Arrow on the CW network through the CW app. It's been crazy. Haven't had the time.
Like I've said before, I probably have no time whatsoever, but I sleep way less than I probably should, and I have to decompress somehow, and TV is just how I do it. So with that being said, that is everything for this episode. I want to remind everyone you can follow us on Twitter as well as join our Discord. If you follow us on Twitter or join our Discord, you will be seeing all of these articles that we are seeing as we see them. We're trying to make a concerted effort to share these periodically throughout the day so that you can keep up with the news, and then obviously come back and hear us talk all about the stuff that we're sharing over on our Twitter and over on our Discord. You can follow us on Instagram. That's where you'll get the latest updates regarding our latest episodes of the show. We do have these episodes available over on YouTube, as well as all the other podcast platforms. You've probably found us on a podcast platform, but just so you know, there are other ones. So if you are interested in jumping over to a different one, we're probably also over on there. We always are looking for listener feedback. You can obviously get in touch with us over on Twitter or Instagram or YouTube, or you can reach out to us at thestreamingwars@gmail.com. You can head over to our site, where you can see all of the previous episodes. If there's an issue with the show notes, you'll be able to see the full show notes over on the site as well. The website is thestreamingwars.io. You can leave us reviews wherever you are listening to this. Either give us a thumbs up over on YouTube, or you can give us a 5-star review wherever you are listening to our podcast. Those are always greatly appreciated. And if you are not thinking a 5-star is warranted, please take the time to send us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com to let us know what we could be doing differently, or what you'd like us to focus on differently, so that we can kind of ease you towards the 5-star range, or explain our thought process behind the focus that we are doing. So with all of that being said, for Tony and myself, this has been the Streaming Wars, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.
Talking about Rick and Morty, so in grad school, which is just a few years ago, I went to school for math, and so I went to school with a bunch of nerdy people. Evidently, the creator of Rick and Morty is a mathematician, so every time there's like a new release of the show, I'd go into the offices where the other grad students are, and they would just be talking up Rick and Morty, and they'd be making quotes and stuff all day long, and I got made fun of because I didn't watch Rick and Morty. But yeah, evidently there was like stuff in the show that sort of pertained to our studies, and yeah, they were all nerds for it, and they were like geeking out, and even the professors were like all into it. But I never watched it. But yeah, I got made fun of because I didn't watch an animated cartoon. So
I watched Rick and Morty once. I watched an episode, and I couldn't get through 5 minutes. The voices just made my head hurt.
I started it, and I was like, not for me at all. But anyway, there's your funny story.